That would be a minor calyx. If there are two or three that run together and form a larger structure, then this would be the major. So each one of these individual calyces would be a minor calyx, and then where they run together, that would be the major calyx. Renal artery, you ought to know that one. Renal capsule, remember that's the outer covering of the kidney. Renal column, remember the renal columns are those areas between the pyramids. So if we drew our pyramids kind of going in toward the center like that, these areas right in here would be the renal columns. That's where the blood vessels, nerves, lymphatics use that as a passageway. Renal cortex, of course, that's this outer layer on the outside of the pyramid. Renal medulla, that's this general area that includes all of the pyramids inside of the cortex. Renal papilla, remember the word papilla means cone or nipple shape, and so there's the renal papilla. Renal pelvis, remember the pelvis is this gathering area right in here where urine will eventually be funneled from the calyces into the renal pelvis. Renal pyramid, renal vein, ureter, those should all be familiar words. And then look at the next set of words starting up on that right-hand column: collecting tubule or duct, cortical nephron, distal convoluted tubule. Of course, these all go along with that amplification that we saw of the one big pyramid on that model. So here's the big renal pyramid. We're going to see the renal corpuscles up here. There will be collecting ducts that run all the way down to the tip. There will be proximal and then loops of Henle and distal convoluted tubule, and then the collecting ducts. So those should be familiar terms. Now here's one I didn't name in class, but we talked about it a little bit. The term cortical nephron. Cortical nephron. Well, that refers to nephrons whose entirety is up in the cortex. All of that nephron is pretty much in the cortex. So this would be called a cortical nephron. And only a little bit of the loop of Henle would actually come down into the pyramid. A juxtamedullary nephron would be one with a long loop of Henle that might get way down into the pyramid. So this would be one of those juxtamedullary nephrons. Now most of the filtration and reabsorption and secretion, most of that stuff that's done is done by the cortical nephrons. There's not very many juxtamedullaries in relation to the number of cortical nephrons. The reason you have to have some juxtamedullary nephrons is to be able to pull water out of the filtrate when you are dehydrated, because the osmolarity changes within the blood and within the body fluids, so that when you're dehydrated, it's very hard to pull water out of the filtrate. And yet you have to, because you want to save as much water as you possibly can when you're dehydrated. And that's where these juxtamedullary nephrons come in. Now, next time we talk in lecture, we'll talk about why you have to pull out a certain amount of urine all the time, and this will all relate back to that. And so what those juxtamedullaries allow you to do is to cleanse the filtrate even in those situations where you're very, very dehydrated. Okay, so that's the difference. Loop of Henle, of course, we know that's that little dropper that comes down and goes back up. Proximal convoluted tubule, that's right next to the glomerulus. And then renal corpuscle, that's the entire structure of both Bowman's capsule with the glomerulus inside of it. And then the next little set of words, afferent arteriole, efferent arteriole, Bowman's capsule, glomerulus, juxtaglomerular apparatus, those should all be familiar. And then that word podocyte, podocyte. The podocytes are those specialized cells that look like little fingers or little hands that make up the visceral layer of Bowman's capsule. Podocytes. Specialized cells. Cell starts with a C. Specialized cells that comprise visceral layer. Visceral layer. I'm having a hard time spelling today. Y'all ever have that? Visceral. Bowman's capsule. Okay. Now, remember how I described that? Little hands, interdigitate your fingers like this. So look at those models, and especially the newer one of those two models, and you'll see how those little cells that grip the capillaries of the glomerulus have little finger-like extensions that fit together like that. And that's the idea of creating a membrane that filtration can occur through. Okay, so there's all of those terms. If you have any trouble with any of them, well, call me over. It's got anatomy of a sheep kidney. I think we have pig kidneys. They're a lot bigger, and we'll use those. I'll get a couple out. Somebody can cut them open, and we'll find what we can find in there. Sometimes the kidneys are not quite as dramatically visual as a model is, but we'll